All right, friends, we are back with your favorite podcast show of the week. It is Location Weekly. It's actually episode number 549. I know I said that last week. It was 548 last week, but we're here. It's 549, and we're recording on December the 28th. It's not our normal show, as I highlighted last week. This is our annual prediction show where we don't talk about the news necessarily of the week past or the weeks past. We kind of just take a little step back and kind of look at what we think is in the crystal ball ahead, and just some ideas that Aubriana and I have on kind of what we might expect. So, Aubriana, how are you?
I'm good. I've really enjoyed just the downtime this past week and kind of, turning things off, disconnecting for a while and time with family and kids. And we had some snow flurries on Christmas Eve, so that was fun. And, just the whole chaos of little ones, like, opening lots of gifts and playing with new crafts and toys and books. So it's been fun. But so I was able to really spend some good time between last night and this morning brainstorming on predictions and talking about those things. So it was nice to turn my brain on in a different way outside of mom mode for a few moments. And though closing out the year strong, just trying to enjoy some PTO that I didn't ever take.
Yeah, it's been similar in some ways for me. I've had lots of time, mostly because I actually tested positive for COVID. So I've been kind of in the full-on isolation, didn't do any family time or any Christmas of celebrations or anything, just because needed to stay on my own. So gave me lots of time to just sort of catch up and watch a lot of Netflix and just kind of chill out a little bit. So that was good. But ready to jump back into it and kind of, get right back into work mode here. So, kick off the new year. So as I said, it's our prediction show. And so we've got a couple, three, I think, each that we're going to just touch on, over the next few minutes. And I'll let Aubriana start us off with, what she's thinking for 2022.
Okay, let's kick it off. So my first prediction is going to be one that is very in line with my day-to-day work. And I do think we're going to continue to see a lot of growth in CTV this year in 2022. But I think that it's going to come with some refinement alongside of that. So some key areas that I think that we're going to see some changes. I do think we'll continue to see more CTV bought and sold programmatically. And an increased ad spend on that channel as well. I think a big influencer is likely going to be the midterm elections and politics that will play a big role here in the US. So I think we're going to see a lot more on that on the CTV side this election cycle than we saw in the last. And I think we're going to continue to see an increase in a migration to AVOD. So the advertising video on demand, more and more people want to move off of those expensive, cable bills that they're paying for whatever channels that maybe they are or are not watching. And I do think in particular, we're going to see a lot of growth in the EU5 here. So I'm expecting to see that continue to increase as well. Also, I think we're going to witness some more experiential advertising in the CTV space. So that could be interacting with QR codes on our smart TVs, even some AR type of engagement, just more experiential type of, ads that we're going to see where not only is it more attribution or kind of trackable in terms of how the actual format is performing, but just, pushing towards engagement. So we'll see a big focus on measurement, I believe. And one of the key drivers for that, in my opinion, is that, traditional linear television that we've seen has always been measured by the likes of Nielsen and their panel. And, when my husband Jerome and I actually moved to Atlanta, 12 years ago now, we were a Nielsen panel family. Like we had a panel, and I know how that works. And so it's actually a little bit mind blowing to me that this archaic approach to kind of lumping everybody into one postal code with similar behaviors that happen to fit a bilingual household in this age is a little bit it's an antique approach, right? So I think we're going to see some new changes there, especially after they lost their MRC accreditation. And advertisers and brands are going to, demand more transparency. They're going to want to see more data behind, the evidence and efficacy and reach that their advertising is having, specifically in the CTV space, because it is a much more measurable environment than traditional linear has been. And I think we're going to, alongside of that, see a lot of companies shift or start to offer, measurement, attribution, whether that's footfall or purchase attribution, and just reporting across the CTV and digital space. So starting with maybe a CTV advertising, but being able to measure that across devices in an omni-channel type of way. So across all those digital footprints, we're going to see some of those measurement companies reach into the CTV space and see how they can play. And I think we'll see some challenges around that, and some of those companies flounder a bit because of integration challenges, privacy challenges, data flow, like, adoption of SDKs or third-party pixels, privacy pushbacks. So all of that, I think, will lead to more refinement in the CTV space, but also, increasing technology developments in the platforms, and obviously a lot more spend being allocated in those OTT, CTV, AVOD, SVOD areas. So yes, prediction number one. What do you think about that one?
I think it's good. So for me, I think a lot of what you were saying about the brands and the advertisers, wanting to have more transparency and more sort of insight into, the sort of data sources, if you will, and where they're coming from makes a ton of sense. I think the play into the connected TV space and the OTT space, are, we're seeing so much growth there, right? I mean, I think people are increasingly cutting the cord. I spent the entire last number of days living in Netflix world, right? And Amazon Prime and everything I could find. And I mean, I think there's definitely opportunity there for advertising to make some inroads. I think we've talked this year on a number of stories about the out-of-home companies, the digital out-of-home companies getting into some of that space now and kind of mirroring ads between placements in traditional out-of-home space to, what you see on your small screen, at home. And I think we're going to see a ton of growth there. But I think it does come with a need for transparency and measurement, 100%. So fully on board with your thoughts there. All right, I'll move to my first one, which I think is a big one for this coming year. It's not even, I don't even think it's been a year since we've heard people talking about the idea of NFTs. And if you're not familiar with an NFT, that's a non-fungible token. So this is a cryptographic token that exists in the blockchain world. And essentially people are creating these things to represent tangible assets. This could be a piece of artwork. This could be, a piece of real estate. It could be anything, but basically you can buy sort of these unique assets that have been created that can't be replicated because it's on the blockchain, and they have value and they may rise in value. It's kind of like the new world of, collectibles and comics and things that I grew up with, or hockey cards or whatever, but in a digital sense. And many brands are jumping on board this already and experimenting. I know McDonald's and Coke and Under Armour, and lots of people are trying it. I know Under Armour just released, sort of to coincide with Steph Curry's hitting the that milestone 3-point record, where he hit 2,974 3-pointers, broke the record. And so Under Armour issued a special digital sort of sneaker, thing. And there was only 2,974 copies of this NFT available. They sold them for $333 a piece. That's almost $1 million that they generated in revenue just from marking this milestone with a digital sort of piece that people could buy. And we're seeing more and more of that type of thing. It's not going to slow down. You're going to see many, many more brands, many advertisers jump on this in 2022. What I'm hoping to see, and kind of where the prediction piece comes, is a bit of a connection between where these things are accessible or made available from a geo perspective. So I can see a sort of an overlay between the physical world and an NFT world, where you get like sort of Pokemon Go plus NFTs, sort of coming together, right? The gaming community getting behind it in that sense, or physical bricks and mortar retail, or restaurant chains, sort of making their spaces the place where you can find the NFT. That becomes interesting to me, because then it's driving traffic, it's driving revenue, and you're actually selling something, in the actual NFT itself. So I see a lot of opportunity for this, and I think this is going to be a big play for the location, community coming into the new year here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a great prediction, and I agree with a lot of that focus. And it's interesting because when we first started talking about blockchain technology many years ago, it was a very like, I don't know, kind of smoke and mirrors, rainbows and unicorns type of thing, and also very vague in terms of what the actual benefits were of blockchain technology. And I think we've continued to see some real world applications and refinement of that over the last few years. And I do think that we'll continue to see more of that this coming year, where we have just, it's starting to take flight, right? We need to see some more applications of how this works. NFT is super interesting. I'm very interested in looking at this from like the art perspective, and how you can buy and sell things in that sense. And my one other thought here is, are there going to be explorations into ways to make this a more environmentally friendly technology as well? Because as we've heard, there's a lot of implications on climate change with the amount of computers and the amount of energy that it takes to actually run blockchain and make all of those data points across ledgers on an every single day basis, and an always on capability. So I'm hopeful that that will be something that we start to explore as well, if there is more of a reducing that carbon footprint type of approach that they can take and make this a little bit more usable. But I like that prediction. It's good.
All right.
All right. So on to my second prediction here. I have around just the way that data flows and works, and traditionally how we have used, consumer data, and how advertisers and brands have been able to use that over the years, and how they'll continue to use that might be shifting. So we've seen a rise in data clean rooms, and heard a lot about these data clean rooms, if you will, or bunkers, from a variety of different companies that have been trying to, set up a more privacy-centric approach to the way that this works. And, we saw some of these shifts happening even as early as, let's say, 2018, when we've had some big agencies and big media players with acquisitions such as IPG acquisition of Axiom. And there's been several of those, where they're starting to say, okay, let's bring in the consumer data platforms in-house so that we can leverage that across all of our agencies under this house and all of those brands' consumer data. So we have kind of a co-op, and we can take ownership of that in essence, so that we are a little bit more insulated from a lot of the changes that are happening when it comes to any type of an identity graph, whether it's something that lives on a live ramp or otherwise. And, I think we're going to continue to see more brands, advertisers, platforms engaging with the likes of Snowflake and InfoSum and Habu and, what have you there. And I think we're going to see more of a shift away from the live ramp approach for the data crosswalking and matching, and trying to more eliminate the middleman, right? I mean, it's kind of it's the focus of what, you know, blockchain and crypto and everything is eliminating that middleman in some essence. And this is the same case here, is that, you know, people are trying to have that more direct one-to-one matching and approach, where there's less players, less capability for data leakage, if you will. And it's also going to mean more of a probabilistic and contextual targeting approach to audience finding, which is okay because we can show that it is still effective, and likely less of a deterministic approach. So I think that's like a big area that we're going to continue to see, just new ways that brands, advertisers, agencies, representative of that, you know, and then these platforms like the DSPs starting to engage with consumer data for specifically for targeting, as well as for insights and analytics on the backside of things, just providing those insights and how brands can connect with their most valuable consumers. So I mean, it's geeky, but I'm excited to see kind of how that plays out and what are the capabilities going to be, and kind of uptick there.
Yeah. So, yes, the elimination of the middleman. I'll go along with that for the most part. I think that you know, there's been, you know, you pointed out live ramp. I think there's a lot of people that have, there's been an exodus lately, right, of people leaving live ramp, you know, doing new startups, you know, kind of going all over the place. And I think part of that is creating this new data clean room, you know, sort of community and other things around that. I think, you know, there's a couple thoughts running through my head listening to you. So one is sort of the growth of that clean room, the transparency piece that you talked about, but even the environmental impact piece that you talked about. I think that, you know, we're gonna see this sort of wave of a movement towards, let's call it charitable, you know, sort of initiatives that are tied to data over the next little while, and so I think you're going to see, you know, sort of this new wave of companies that emerge that says, hey, yeah, we're collecting data, but you know, there's good that can be done with this data, and good that can happen from this data, and organizations that can be supported through this data, and whether that's impacting the environment or impacting poverty or impacting whatever, you know, I think there's, you know, sort of the, you know, some good that can come. And I think that part of that too is we've had 18 months, 19 months, however long we've been in this now for this COVID world, of you know, sort of reflecting upon who we are as people and what's going on in our world, and connecting with family and realizing what's important. And I think for a lot of business people in our community, at least people I've talked to in the LBMA circles in the world, like, people are really reflecting on what's important. And I think they're looking at how do we make our companies more relevant, and more impactful in communities, than just data companies, right? So that's kind of, you know, my reflection on what you're saying. So, but I agree overall.
I like it.
Okay, my second prediction. So we're going to jump over now to the autonomous vehicle space, and I think we're going to see some more growth here. I think partly driven by COVID, where you've got, you know, sort of just this, you know, need to, you know, sort of not touch things and not be, you know, in proximity of people and other things as much as possible. And so the notion of, you know, automated delivery and autonomous vehicles makes a lot of sense. You have companies like Waymo, which, you know, have come out of the Google world, Neuro. There's a company called Starship over in Europe, you know, that are all doing, you know, fairly well at getting into the space of like little robots running down the street, delivering, you know, goods and services and things like that. And so I think you're going to see more and more of this. We've talked earlier this year about FedEx and UPS and others, you know, playing around with drones and doing deliveries, and Amazon's in that space as well. So I just think that, you know, for, you know, certain types of packaging, certain types of products, it makes sense that you're going to see more and more of this type of delivery. I know there are companies playing around with truck fleets and autonomous boats out there, like for shipping and things like that as well. And even those kinds of things, I think, are still early days to me, but I think we're going to see growth in the space overall this year. And, the reason that that's relevant to our community is that, the all of those vehicles rely on high quality GPS and navigation systems and location data, right? Not just where they are, but where they have to go and when they have to get there and the route that they have to take and the optimization of those routes and all of that kind of stuff. And so we're getting better on satellites and accuracy of navigation. But I think that a lot of the players that we've worked with over the years that are involved in various location signal pieces, whether that's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or other things, have a role to play there, because I think you need to, in order, if you're going to deliver something, let's say in an office building, from one floor to the next to a certain, office suite or boardroom or whatever, you need to have microlocation layered in on top of, the GPS signals and other things happening. And so I think, we're not there yet, but I think there's an opportunity for some of these companies to really leapfrog ahead and show that they can be truly accurate and in delivering things in an autonomous way. So I'm looking forward to growth, not just from the companies I mentioned, but I think there's new companies yet to emerge there, and obviously all the car companies are all playing in this space as well. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to add. I think that's a great prediction. I'm hopeful that there's continued improvements in customer convenience and delivery of goods and services. So, I mean, I think that everybody is like, somehow we're working from home, but we're working more and we're busier than ever. And, anything that we can do to improve upon any of those, our lives on a day-to-day basis and minimize some of the things that we have to do that are extra and not delivering joy. I think that's a great place for us to invest in and hope that there's a lot of growth this year. So, all right, so I'm going to go somewhere that is not as fun of a topic, but it's kind of inevitable here. But we're going to go to the privacy talk, right? Okay, where are we going? What do we think is going to happen in 2022 here? And I expect a very big uptick in chatter around privacy in 2022, but perhaps just chatter. And what I mean by that is we've seen some interesting moves. So for example, the delay in Google pushing through the cookie deprecation, they pushed that out and delayed that change. But we've also seen a lot of focus in the last month or so, specifically on location data and use of location data for marketing and advertising purposes. I'll call out, there's two Congress representatives, Congressman, it's Jamie Raskin from Maryland and Congresswoman Katie Porter from California. And, they had sent a letter to the FCC and the FTC, along with 42 other Democratic colleagues, requesting new rulemaking around strengthening these privacy protections that are needed for consumers, specifically calling out location data. We saw some call outs after we talked about the Life 360 and Tile, business deal that happened. And some of the data perhaps that belonged to, minors and children that was being sold and repackaged, and how that's maybe getting pushed out through multiple providers or data aggregators. So, I think this is very likely to lead to continued consolidation in the location data space in terms of providers. But I think it also is, really highlighting that there's a clear need for and use of PII. The applications need to have a clear need for and a use of. And I do think that we're going to see ownership of data slowly shift back to the consumer, right? And, maybe it's going to start likely with, data minimization, but I think it's going to kind of get a little bit worse and harder, challenge-wise for advertisers and platforms before it gets better. In a perfect world, I would love to see where us as consumers actually own our data that we create, and we can exchange that as a value for, free services, whether that's, video on demand, right? So there's advertising that is something that I exchange my data for because I want to have relevant advertising, and I'm also okay with they know what I'm watching so that they can provide more relevant content, create more relevant content that I'm interested in. So having a very clear value proposition for consumers, but also taking that ownership out of these aggregators, out of the SDK owners, and placing it back in our hands and saying, hey, we want to give you the value and the opportunity to sunset your data as you see fit, and making it very clear and simple. Because right now, even with the changes in things like GDPR and with CCPA, all of those things, they're not changing the transparency or the understanding that the everyday human being has of what's happening with their data and their personal information. And so really shifting that back, I think we will likely perhaps see some movement on this in 2023. But I think with all of the elections happening this year, as well as, just some changes that are happening in terms of data collection in general, we're not going to see a ton of movement in 23 until 2023. But I expect to hear lots about it. What do you think?
Fully on board with that. So I recall I had a conversation early in the year last year, like around, it must have been March, April, something like that. I got a call from Senator Wyden's office, one of his staff, and so that's Democratic Senator from Oregon, and they want to have a conversation about location data and the Patriot Act and a bunch of other things that they were concerned about. The use of this type of data by government agencies, to track down illegal immigrants or all sorts of other things that they didn't think were appropriate. And you can't argue that, right? Like you got to say, like, yes, that's, like there's good commercial use cases of location data, and then there's not. And there's limits on, I believe there should be limits on what the government can do with this type of data. And so I think, yes, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of dialogue around this. It would be great, and we've been talking for years now about this world where I can, as a consumer, proactively contribute my demographic, psychographic information, location into something where I can exchange that for something I want. I don't think we're quite there yet. We've talked about this idea for a number of years, this personal data vaulting type of scenario. I still think it's viable. I think, to what you were alluding to earlier with the CTV world, I think it's, it's the makeup of that makes more sense now. But we need to get to, the true notion where, privacy is an exchange. And we've been talking about this for years, right? It's an exchange of value. It's not just, here's my stuff, do with it as you please. And we have the same thing happening here in Canada as well. So there's just a story that broke, I don't know, the other week about the government has admitted that they were buying data from the phone companies here to understand whether people were following stay-at-home orders or not early in the pandemic. Apparently that ceased now, but they were doing that. They didn't tell people they were doing that, and so people are obviously up in arms about it. So I think the interesting thing is COVID has in some cases made the use of location data for things like, are people following stay-at-home orders, or am I coming in contact with somebody who has COVID and I want to know about that, or so on and so forth. These are good, potentially positive use cases of location data, as long as you have proper disclosure and people know what's going on and they can understand the benefit. There's value, there's an exchange, right? But I think when you're doing that, without that kind of knowledge and transparency, it becomes a problem, right? And I think, again, we just need to go back to these basic principles of value exchange and transparency, and then generally people are good, people are okay. So yeah, that's kind of what I think about it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because we're seeing, it's like we're hearing two different stories where we're saying, we've got government on one hand saying, trust us, we've got this under control when it comes to your health or, the economy or whatever it may be. But then they're doing things that are not trustworthy on the other side. And it's definitely, I think, concerning as like citizens, as just humans. And I do, I started thinking about this earlier today too, is that something that I love about shopping on Amazon, and I also love, shopping locally and trying to support local business owners as well. But what I love about it is that I can go to the Smile Amazon checkout and support a variety of charities when I do that. And I think that's really powerful. And I started thinking, what if there was a way to support charities through your data, right? Is that something that people would be willing to do? I think so. I think that people would be willing to say, and instead of giving me a $20 gift card to my favorite QSR, would you be willing to make a larger donation to a charitable organization of my choice with my, in exchange for the value of my data? And I'm like, think about the good that could be done with it. As you mentioned, there's a lot of good that could be done with it, but, leaving it in the hands of, well, the wild, wild west right now, or government is questionable to me. Like, how do we just make a better environment? As an industry, perhaps, before it gets down to someone else who maybe doesn't understand it or has their own motivations for it.
Yeah. No, and what you said is bang on. I'm actually working on a startup. I can't say too much about it yet in that space, so I'll tell you more about that another time. But anyhow, all right. Final prediction from me is a rebirth or a growth in the peer-to-peer marketplace space. So, this isn't a new space. This is a space that we've been part and parcel of in the location world for a long time now. I can think back to companies like Zarly and TaskRabbit and some of these guys that had created marketplaces based on your location to find goods or services nearby, to trade or swap or barter or purchase, based on your geolocation. Obviously, in today's world, we have things like Facebook Marketplace, and things like that are growing by leaps and bounds right now. And I think the reason I wanted to kind of highlight this is because I think as we move into this next year ahead, for many people, there's a lot of still a high percentage of the population that's unemployed right now or underemployed right now, and I think that we've been sitting around our homes. We've realized sort of what's important to us. We've looked around and said like there's a lot of stuff in our houses, for many of us anyways, that we don't need. And so let's put that up on Facebook Marketplace. Let's sort of recoup, some of that investment. Let's make some fast cash. Let's find people nearby who need this thing, actually need it, or have some use for it. Or service for that matter. It doesn't have to be products. It can be, I know how to play guitar, and you want to learn to play guitar, and you live near me. Let's hook up and do that. And I'll charge you, and create a marketplace that way, which is what TaskRabbit was all about back in the day before IKEA acquired it. So I think we're going to see a sort of a resurgence of these types of marketplaces and growth for the ones that are already there, and I think that coupled to some extent with I think a bit of a rebirth of the shopping mall, the traditional physical shopping mall, because I think we've been cooped up. We want to get back out into the real world again. And I think the malls are going to see a bit of a, sort of a lift in traffic. I don't know if it'll be long lived or not, but they will see a lift in traffic, I believe, going into the new year. Once all these restrictions lift and we kind of get out of this COVID bubble that we're in. But I think part of that might be too that they've got stuff that's been sitting around. They can, take advantage of some of these marketplaces, some of these merchants and these retailers in there, especially local business, especially small business. I think there's a big opportunity there to participate within the marketplace community, and even business to business type of marketplaces at a local level. So I think, I see big opportunity and big growth in this type of peer-to-peer structure, and I think a lot of money to be made, or at least exchanged, let's call it, across that type of environment. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think also like people, like you said, people have really realized that they don't need so much stuff. What actually, they've taken the Marie Kondo kind of book and plugged it in, like what actually is, you know, bringing me, excitement and happiness into my home and my life. And if it doesn't deliver that, then I should get rid of it. That was like very freeing part of moving, just kind of purging so many things that I don't really use and didn't have the need for. And I'm sure there's so much more that I still could do. But it's also about recycling, right? And reusing and finding things not only at a discounted price, but something that maybe is unique, right? It's not something that's store bought. It's something that's vintage, or
Yeah.
it has a story behind it. And I think that that's like really exciting. But I do love the idea also of new opportunities for in-person retail. I know here, and in New York, where I am right outside the city, there was a ton of different holiday pop-ups for small businesses outside, outside by the train station, just different little stores, and small businesses could come with their soaps and their candles and their jewelry and headbands and all those fun things. And it was really fun to just kind of support those businesses, but also find something that's unique and didn't come with a specific tag on it. So I'm excited to see how that grows as well. And it kind of merges in with like the whole convenience factor you talked about with, the automation as well.
Yeah. So that's it. I think overall, lots to look forward to as we go into a new year. We can, pray and hope that COVID won't be with us when we're doing the show next year. I'm hoping for sure. And yeah, but I think there's lots ahead of us in terms of opportunity and new companies to come, and lots of growth. So just wishing everybody a fantastic new year, and good times ahead. And we'll see you next week for another show.